Well, today it's always an honor to have with us Dr. Jerome Corsi. He's senior staff reporter for WorldNet Daily, and I'm sure you have read a lot of his articles. It's always an honor to have him on the show. And today we're going to talk to him about his book, Who Really Killed Kennedy? And, of course, we wanted to get into some other issues with him as well. So, Dr. Corsi, nice to have you, my friend. How you doing?
Good, Perry. Good to be back with you. Thank you.
You know, you take on a lot of subjects, but why this one?
This is a subject I've been involved with since I was a kid. My father was a labor lobbyist for the Brotherhood of Railroad Trainmen, and I knew the Kennedys, saw the Kennedys going back to the 1957 McClellan Committee hearings when Jack Kennedy first came to public prominence nationally. And I've known a lot of the people involved. I tell a story in Who Really Killed Kennedy of the Elkins family, which is the crime family in Portland, Oregon, that was J.B. Elkins was the lead witness in the McClellan Committee hearings. And it's largely an unknown story, as I think much of what I discuss in the book is not really appreciated fully. The Elkins in the Oval Office told Jack Kennedy he was going to be killed. There was an assassination attempt underway, and that they described the plot to him in great detail, that it would be a high-powered rifle with scope, tall building during a motorcade. And the public record is even that morning when Jack Kennedy woke up in Fort Worth on November 22nd, 1963, he was talking about how easy it would be to kill him that day during the motorcade. So Jack Kennedy was fully aware that the plots were out to assassinate him, and actually, there had been two earlier attempts that month in November to kill Jack Kennedy in assassination plots, first in Chicago and then in Tampa.
Now, is this some of the information you got when more information was declassified?
Some of this has come, I've known some of this for years. The Dallas was the third assassination attempt, first surfaced really back with the House investigation into JFK's assassination in the 70s. Most people just are totally unaware of it. A couple of good books have been written on it. Waldron and Tom Hartman discussed it in Ultimate Sacrifice, and then again in their book, A Legacy of Secrets. So, this is fully documented, and the two assassination plots are well known to specialists, but not to the American people. And so I wanted to resolve to bring a lot of this information that I've known over the years, including some that's not in the JFK assassination record that I researched myself or knew firsthand, and to bring it forward into the record so people could understand what the assassination was really all about.
All right, before we get into the motive here, what was the president's response to the fact that he knew he was a target? There were previous attempts, indeed, even the day that he was assassinated, that he made those comments. So why wasn't there more precaution on this?
Well, there was a lot of precaution taken. I mean, in Chicago, the Kennedys canceled the trip at the last minute when they knew the assassination plot was on. Pierre Salinger, in a very embarrassed way, explained Jack wasn't going to show up. In Tampa, the security was really heightened. And in Dallas, that morning it had been raining in Fort Worth, and those worried about Kennedy's protection thought the bubble top would go on the limousine. It's just that in the short 10-minute flight from Fort Worth to Dallas, the rain stopped and the bubble top came off. In fact, you can see the limousines, the motorcade taking off from Love Field in Dallas, and there's big pools of water on the ground from how much rain there was that day. Jack Kennedy had kind of a fatalism about him. He was not going to be a coward. He was not going to hide or stay out of the public because of an assassination threat. He had faced death many times in his life, even as a child. Jack Kennedy had Addison's disease, which is an adrenal gland deficiency. He had congenital back problems. They were not a football injury like the family said. Wore a back brace, very severe back brace, every day of his life, and was frequently on crutches. Kennedy did not want to end up his life old and an invalid, and he had an acceptance that he might die young. His favorite poem was "I Have a Rendezvous with Death." He used to recite that one all the time.
All right. So many things come out of this. Was there more than one shooter?
Yes. I mean, I say that I'm not only interested in who the shooters are, but I want people to understand who put the shooters in the field. I really argue that Jack Kennedy was the first victim of what we've come to call this New World Order. And I assign the main responsibility for the assassination at the doorstep of Allen Dulles, who was the head of the CIA that Jack Kennedy fired after the Bay of Pigs fiasco.
Right.
And by the way, Bobby Kennedy assigned it too. Bobby Kennedy fired every Dulles he could find in the federal government and swore that no Dulles would ever work again in the federal government as long as he was alive. But this whole New World Order crowd, which came in after World War II, was actually before. If we go back to who Allen Dulles was, Allen Dulles and his brother John Foster Dulles, for whom the airport is named in Washington. John Foster Dulles was Secretary of State under Eisenhower, 1953, and Allen Dulles was head of the CIA. The two of them had worked with Brown Brothers Harriman firm, the Wall Street firm, prior to World War II, and they were funding Hitler. We funded Hitler, and the Dulles brothers were at the center of it. The other two who were members of the Brown Brothers Harriman firm were the progenitors of the Bush dynasty, Prescott Bush and George Herbert Walker. They were all for funding Nazis. They were funding Hitler. In fact, Roosevelt, right after Pearl Harbor, had to close down a bank, a Nazi bank, Union Bank in New York, that the Dulleses and the Bushes were running. So as I relate the story, this whole idea of New World Order comes from the Nazis. The Nazis were the first to talk about New World Order. And what they meant, Nazis were National Socialists. They were leftists. They had the idea that they could have a partnership between business and government. The communists wanted to eliminate private property and wanted to eliminate business, where the Nazis were happy to have business and government, but they wanted to fight wars so they could rearm, and the munitions were seen to develop, even if they were lying wars, even if they, Reichstag lies, Reichstag fire lies. They were happy to tell that and whip the people up into a war frenzy for the international cross-border, multi-state businesses where the Dulleses and the Bushes were forming partnerships with IG Farben and other industrial German companies with U.S. companies. And between wars, the Dulleses, Allen Dulles stayed in Bern, Switzerland, where he was, by 1943, helping the Germans move their money out of Germany. Number two, Bormann, to Hitler, worked with Dulles. They moved billions in today's market value, probably trillions, out of Germany into the U.S. stock market.
Wow.
And we brought over, tens of thousands of German scientists. By the way, Germany also had envisioned a welfare state for those not able to participate in the economic growth of their multinational corporations, and a Gestapo that would enforce, in concentration camps, anyone who disagreed with them. And I say that the Dulleses and this whole New World Order crowd was determined that we were going to become the Fourth Reich. And what John Kennedy would not fight Allen Dulles' lying wars. It really brings you back to themes of the warnings that Eisenhower gave in the farewell address when he warned Americans about the military-industrial complex. And Kennedy, when he would not allow Allen Dulles to trick him into using in the Bay of Pigs, this was not a freedom fighter group hitting the beaches. This was a CIA-trained mercenary army. Kennedy knew it. Dulles had planned that the mercenaries were going to fail on the beach. He thought he could trick Jack Kennedy into being embarrassed that he would, this invasion was going to fail, and that Kennedy would launch a airstrike from a carrier offshore of Cuba. Kennedy refused. He wouldn't go to war with Cuba over this ragtag CIA mercenary army. And as soon as the Bay of Pigs was over, he unceremoniously fired Allen Dulles for the CIA, said he was going to break the CIA up into 1,000 pieces, and that's when I say Jack Kennedy signed his death warrant.
Wow.
Wow.
All right, let me take a quick break here. When I come back, Dr. Corsi, I want to talk to you about, from your opinion, who was Lee Harvey Oswald, what was his connections to all of this, and then you, like me and some others, have seen some of the pictures of JFK's wounds that appear that there were multiple gun wounds, and maybe you can comment on that. We'll be right back with Dr. Jerome Corsi from WorldNet Daily in just a moment. Okay, we're back with Dr. Jerome Corsi, and of course we're talking about his new book, Who Really Killed Kennedy, and this whole subject has been fascinating for years, to say the least. In my lifetime, I think we've lived to see two of those things, where were you when? One was when Kennedy was assassinated, and the other one was 9/11. And I remember Dr. Corsi very vividly. I was a sophomore in high school. I was in the middle of a German class, trying to learn German, didn't do very well in it, and the speaker came over, and the loudspeaker saying that the president had been shot, and of course the rest is history. I have seen those videos where it looks like the president's head went forward and back. Can you comment on that and the wounds that you saw?
Well, all the wounds at Parkland were described at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, is where Kennedy was first brought immediately after the shooting, and the doctors were world class. They recognized immediately that Kennedy was not going to be saved. All the wounds were observed to be frontal wounds. The throat wound was just right of the Adam's apple. It was a puncture mark, an entry wound from the front. And if it was a frontal wound, then there had to be more than one shooter, because the Texas School Book Depository, where Lee Harvey Oswald was supposed to have been, was behind Jack Kennedy at that time when the shooting started. And the head wound was observed at Parkland. Doctors all universally, they put their hands up to their head. They said the back of his head was blown away. That would again be an exit wound, in other words, a frontal shot. Now, in studying the head wound, I agreed with Josiah Thompson, who did some very precise measurements, and I think it was a double hit. I think first there was a hit to the back of the head, and it started moving the head forward. That's when the head flap comes out of the Zapruder film. That's an exit wound. But then simultaneously, Kennedy is hit from the front, and the back of his head is blown out, and that drives Kennedy's body violently to the left and back. You can even see the head wound in the back. People very rarely study the end of the Zapruder film, but Jackie Kennedy went out in the back of the car, in the trunk, to collect her husband's brain matter and try to put it back in his head. It's like an impulse when you break an arm. If you just put it back together again, it'll be all right. And she actually sat Jack Kennedy up. In the end of the Zapruder film, which very few people watch, is very bizarre. It's eerie, because Kennedy's sitting up with his head all back put together again, looking as if he's just fine, sitting upright, going through the triple underpass. Of course, he's dead. And in a nicely enhanced picture where you can see the back of his head, it's clear the back of his head is blown away, just like the doctor said at Parkland.
All right, so who is Lee Harvey Oswald?
Well, again, I point out in the book, Who Really Killed Kennedy, that the Warren Commission suppressed evidence. The Warren Commission, Lee Rankin, the chief counsel, wrote a memo to the Warren Commission stating that Lee Harvey Oswald was they had evidence Lee Harvey Oswald was a paid FBI informant. He was being paid $200 a month. He was an agent. They had his agent number. They also had Lee Harvey Oswald's CIA agent number. And there was a file being maintained in the CIA starting in 1960. It was created by James Angleton, who kept the files on U.S. military who we encouraged to defect to the Soviet Union as double agents. Soviet Union thought that they were wanting to renounce their citizenship. So evidently, Oswald was also a CIA agent, and this defection to the Soviet Union was a staged defection. Evidently, even though the Warren Commission said that Lee Harvey Oswald was a communist, likely that was just the cover story, because if Oswald was in this program with these files being maintained, the strong likelihood is that he was always loyal to the United States. And again, the Warren Commission held a meeting on this information on January 27, 1964, an internal meeting. The minutes of those internal meetings are now available and are on the internet. And the Warren Commission, at the recommendation of Allen Dulles, decided this information was just too explosive, too damaging to the FBI and to the CIA. So the Warren Commission suppressed the evidence. And made Lee Harvey Oswald an agent. And I argue in the book that Lee Harvey Oswald most likely did not leave the lunchroom, that he was on the second floor throughout the shooting. I've been convinced that's where Lee Harvey Oswald was told to go, and believing he was an agent following an assignment, I think that's where he went.
All right, the gentleman that shot him, was that an informant as well?
Well, you know, Jack Ruby was Jack Rubenstein. He had ties back to the Chicago Capone mob of the 1930s. He had murdered a labor union official for the mob and was sent to Dallas, and he had always remained in the mob. So a lot of mob calls just before he shot Oswald. In fact, you referenced earlier the World Trade Center. You know, when the first plane went to the World Trade Center, I was watching it on television. I thought that could be an accident. When the second plane hit, that instant you said terrorism. I was watching television that Sunday morning when Jack Ruby jumped out and shot Harvey Oswald in the stomach, you know, the intestines. Mob hit. And immediately I said mob, because it was so obviously a silencing, a mob-type hit, that it just jumped out at me that this was, you know, a mob involvement plan. And the mob and the CIA had been working together since Lucky Luciano in World War II, the mobster who was let out of prison and helped us turn the Sicilian mafia, to be sympathizers with the Allies when we invaded Sicily during World War II.
Well, I too remember, because it was one of the few things at that point, live television being what it is, to see that happen was a rare thing, to have cameras in that that parking lot when that happened.
And it was shocking.
Yeah,
it was shocking.
All right, so what, Dr. Corsi, what are you trying to do with this book? I mean, you're uncovering, you're documenting a lot of things that we've all have been suspicious of. Some people call it conspiracy. You know the drill. But now you have brought it forward as most of this information has been declassified. What do you want your readers to get from this?
Well, see, the point of the book is that the day Jack Kennedy was killed was the day this New World Order crowd won. Kennedy was not going to go, he didn't go into Laos with troops, he was not going to go into Vietnam, he was not going to fight a lying CIA war. And the CIA, Lyndon Johnson was involved, Lyndon Johnson was going to be replaced on the ticket. And this whole idea that we would fight wars for CIA purposes like Laos or Vietnam when they really weren't in our national security interest, and we were lied to, Johnson fit the bill. A lying Gulf of Tonkin resolution from an incident that never happened, that Jack Kennedy would have scoped out in a minute. Johnson revved up the country, authorizing resolution for Vietnam, a war Jack Kennedy was right. We could not win the way we were going to fight it, but yet it produced for the munitions companies billions of dollars, and we suddenly started single sourcing the weapons. You know, Bell built all the helicopters. That had never happened before. One weapon system was built by multiple companies, and it carries forward. I mean, you know, so we're surprised there were no weapons of mass destruction for Saddam Hussein. I mean, you know, that's the normal MO. Or today, we're having the drums beat by John Kerry saying Sadat was the one who carried out these chemical attacks in Syria, and they have CIA information, but of course we can't see it. And the UN doesn't agree. The UN says there were chemical attacks, but it was the rebels. I mean, come on, this is a pattern where we're fighting these Middle Eastern wars for CIA purposes, and the only economic benefit is to the Saudi Arabians for their oil and their concern over the Shiites in Iran. And yet the American people are lied to or drawn into these wars. And we have massive intelligence agencies. NSA hears every conversation. Hitler would love to have Germany in charge of the EU without firing a shot, and have a regional government in place that was reaching across to do a transatlantic partnership with the United States, superseding our sovereignty once again, with us having an NSA that was working hand in hand with Germany and anyone else, capable of surveilling the population. Hitler never had anything like that. And a CIA that would lie about wars and keep the war energy going for economic benefit. I mean, in a sense, the whole point of this book is, the Allen Dulleses, the dark forces in the CIA, the military-industrial complex killed Jack Kennedy. It was a coup d'etat. And as a result of that, we've become, Jack Kennedy was going to break up the CIA, was not going to fight in Vietnam. We never would have had the student protests of the 60s and the radicalization of the universities. And Jack Kennedy was going to break up the Federal Reserve.
Wow.
He was going to print our own money.
It's called Who Really Killed Kennedy by Dr. Jerome Corsi. You may want to get a copy of it. Check it out at Barnes & Noble or online at Amazon.com. Dr. Corsi, I really do value our time together. I have never heard it so succinctly as you just put it. Thank you for your research and your work, and let's stay in touch and get you back. By the way, before I let you go, you were the first one that said that the chemicals were used by the rebels, right?
Yes. Said that from the very beginning.
Yeah.
It was clear, and we had video of the rebels doing it, but even when you look at the setup of it, there was no reason for that attack to have been an Assad attack.
Right.
Saddam was winning. It didn't make any sense. It made perfect sense for it to be a rebel attack. And why are we thinking even of going into Syria to support Al-Qaeda and jihadists? That's what Obama's been supporting all through Northern Africa with the Muslim Brotherhood. But the Saudis like it because the Saudis want Saddam gone. He's an ally of their archenemy, Iran.
Interesting. Hey, thanks, my friend.
Thanks, Barry.
I really do appreciate and value our time together. We'll get you back soon.
Anytime. Thank you very much.
Okay.